Okay, hello and welcome to another panel discussion. This time the subject is sales and marketing alignment. My name is John Golden from SalesPOP Online Sales Magazine and from Pipeliner CRM, the world's most visual CRM system. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have the panelists who I'm delighted who joined us today, I'm going to have them introduce themselves briefly rather than me read their bios, because that's all, it's more interesting to hear from them. So first of all, I'd like to welcome Matt Hines from Hines Marketing. Well known, probably a lot of you get his newsletter already, but if you don't, I would definitely suggest you sign up for it. So, Matt, if you want to give them a brief introduction to yourself.
Sure. Thanks very much. Yeah, my name is Matt Hines. I started a company called Hines Marketing about 9 years ago. We help companies build predictable pipelines. B2B companies in a variety of different industries, help them increase confidence that they can hit their number and build their pipeline month after month, quarter after quarter. So excited to be here.
Yeah, and next is Samantha Stone, who helps B2B companies grow their revenue, their selling processes. She's a self-confessed marketing junkie. So do you want to introduce yourself, Samantha?
Sure. I'm also a recovering salesperson. I actually began my career in B2B channel sales and complained enough about marketing that at some point they gave me a chance. And I found out it was a lot harder than I thought, but I actually loved it immensely. And so I've spent the majority of my career helping people who sell complex products and services really get sales and marketing aligned with the buyer, which is the other third piece of this that's instrumental. So very much looking forward to our conversation today. I'm sure we're going to learn a lot and talk and debate a lot of important things.
Yeah, and last but not least, Tony Perzo, who is a negotiations training expert. So Tony, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure, Tony. Again, I was a salesperson for many years until I transitioned into margin protecting training. And I've spent a number of years training the biggest companies in the world and negotiation companies like Apple and Samsung and IBM and Rolls-Royce and Red Bull and Pepsi and all the biggest companies. And I've recently, within the last couple of years, have started my own training company, and I focus only on salespeople, training salespeople how to not only sell better, but to sell for more. And I'm glad to be here today.
Yeah, so we have a great panel, great cross section of sales and marketing, and as this is about sales and marketing alignment, that's what we need, good cross section of opinion. Before we get into the discussion itself, what I'd like to do is just launch a quick poll here. So you can give us an idea of what your role is. So I'm just going to ask you quickly if you would just access the poll here. Be great if you could do that. Thank you. And if you have any questions or comments or whatever throughout the event here, I would really like you to put those into the question box. Okay, we have about 80% of people voted. We'll just give it a couple more seconds, see if we can get it up to the 100%. So whoever's ever sleeping out there. Okay. All right, I'm going to close the poll now. And I'm going to share the results. Can everybody see the results okay?
We can.
Excellent. Okay, so there we go. We have 15% are salespeople, 23% sales managers. So good representation of salespeople, good representation of marketing, 23, and then some executives. So excellent. So this is a great cross section of folks on the call today. Okay. So let's get into the discussion itself, and let's just start off with kind of baselining things. Okay, so let's face it. Historically, sales and marketing alignment has been it's been difficult to achieve in many organizations for a variety of reasons. So I'd like to get the panelists' perspective on why this has been so. So maybe I'd just kick off with Matt. Matt, historically, why has this been so hard to achieve?
This is marketing's fault. There's no question, and I can say that as a lifelong marketer who now works with marketing and sales teams together. But I think sales forever has embraced revenue responsibility. Marketing hasn't. Marketing still today struggles with the idea that they're going to be measured on something that's more than just clicks and likes and leads. You can't buy a beer with a marketing qualified lead, and yet marketing continues to want to be focused on metrics that are not aligned with the sales organization's goals. And so, I think that alignment is critical moving forward. It's more than just the reporting. It's more than just objectives. It is a largely cultural in many organizations that needs to be addressed and overcome to ensure that the organizations are going to really embrace the same objectives and work more closely together in a very much more aligned way. But I think it's marketing's responsibility and opportunity to step up and be more part of that.
Excellent. How about you, Samantha? What's your thoughts on this?
Well, I agree with Matt that the number one reason that sales and marketing teams aren't aligned is because marketing measures the wrong things. And we could probably have a whole session about what things we should be measuring, but we traditionally have not been willing to do that. I'd also say, though, that there's a couple other factors that are equally important. And some of it has to do with how salespeople view marketers. And the way they view marketers is sort of the people who create stuff, right? We create content, we find opportunities for them to chase. They don't see us as experts about our buyers because a lot of marketers aren't. And we know from doing research and we know from data and anecdotally that the better we know buyers, the more we communicate directly with them and not just ask salespeople how the conversations are going, the better aligned our teams are. And we need both marketers to step up and own responsibility for those relationships and not be afraid to talk to customers and prospects. And we need salespeople to stop being bouncers that sort of put up barriers to marketers having those kinds of quality conversations. So, to me, measurement number one, but number two is this focus on buyers.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And how about you, Tony? What's your thoughts?
I hate pointing fingers. I would have to point it at C-level. At the. It's whenever I deal with negotiation, which is all about communication, right? How to get buyers and sellers on the same page, how not to bring emotion and conflict into relationships. So it's up to C-level. It's up to the CEO of the company to establish a protocol where we're not looking at sales as sales and marketing as marketing and two different departments. I think moving forward, I think the future is saying sales and marketing, you're now one department and you're the revenue generating department. Mm-hmm. You're all about generating revenue. And how the hell are we going to work together in order to do that? So I think there needs to be a fusion. There needs to be a merging of these two departments. And I think that initiative needs to be spearheaded by key players within organizations.
Yeah, I think those are interesting points from everybody. I have to say, Tony, I have to give an anecdote. I'm not going to mention the company because it's a really large global organization. But some years back, when I was with another organization, myself and Neil Rackham, who wrote Spin Selling, visited this organization, met with the CEO and the senior leaders in the sales department and in the marketing department, and we sat there while the sales and marketing actually literally just had a go at each other for about an hour, and the CEO just watched back and forth. So I kind of take your point, Tony, about there's a C-level responsibility, because at the end of the time, we were in this great position to say, well, there's your problem. We've spent literally, an hour or so finger pointing, but interesting. Okay, so historically it's been difficult to address, but there's a lot of people who's saying, like, today it's more important than ever that it needs to be addressed going forward. So why would you say that's the case, Samantha?
I'm not actually sure it's any more important than it was before. I think it's always been important. But I will say that there's incredible pressure to do it now. And the pressure comes from customers. Customers are doing so much more of their own research. Customers are having expectations about their relationship with us as a company, from when they start to do research to they engage with the sales team till when they've actually we're fulfilling the promise we made to them because they've bought something from us and we're servicing them. And I think their expectations make it a mandate for us to get better at this. There's just so many choices that people can make to solve virtually any problem. There are very few monopolies in the world, and the companies that are successful are the ones who are going to create this singular, exceptional experience for their buyers.
How about you, Matt? Do you think it's more important than ever, or do you think it's just as important as ever?
Well, I think it's more important now because we're putting a focus on it. But I think it was a problem back when, and this still exists today, where sales is out trying to close deals and marketing acts like the arts and crafts department and logos on pens and going to celebrate at the bar because they hit their retweet goal. So I think it's more important perhaps now because we have such transparency on what's working, what's not. Right? We have data that shows what's contributing to what activities, whether they're sales or marketing activities, are contributing to sales, contributing to revenue events. I think our attribution models are getting better to even look at things that cross long, complex sales cycles to demonstrate really what's working and what's not. So yeah, I think I agree with Samantha. I don't know that it's changed in importance, but certainly the visibility is heightened as we get better and better, clearer pictures of what's actually happening out there.
Yeah, no, I really like that point because now, certainly within our own organization now, with Piper, and we actually, in the marketing group, we actually look at the pipeline creation, the amount of dollars created, the amount of opportunities that move through. Like we go right into the sales cycle to assess the performance of marketing, and I think that's a good start in getting people more connected, as you say, rather than celebrating the hitting the retweets number. And what about you, Tony? What do you think about the? Is it more important? Is it less important? Is it just the same as it's always been?
I think so. I think with the day and age we're in and where we're going, I think the buyer is becoming a monster. Is becoming a very powerful. A powerful beast, that's gaining more and more leverage. When I train companies how to negotiate, I train them about, one of the most important things you need to do is gather information and start figuring out where your leverage is and where the buyer's leverage is. And in the world today, the buyers have so much information, have so much access to information that they're getting more and more powerful. So it's going to take a team approach to be able to tackle or conquer. I don't want to make it a combative thing, but it's going to take a unified approach, sales and marketing, holding hands, working together to be able to keep up with this ever-growing this buyer entity that's gaining more and more leverage as every day passes. I mean, I think companies are spending 30 to 40% of their revenue towards sales and marketing. And I don't know what those stats were 10, 15 years ago. But you have to be spending that money in order to to sell in today's world. So I think it is becoming more and more relevant and important. It's becoming more important that teams, marketing and sales work together, and it's becoming more important for sales to understand marketing methodologies and marketing to understand sales methodologies. We almost need to start creating hybrid sale where salespeople are also marketers and marketers are also salespeople because they need to work in unison. They have to, right? Sales need to be able to funnel information to marketing so marketing know what the hell to write about, right? What blog article to write about. So we need to create this synergy, and that only can happen from the top down.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed. So that's a good segue because we were kind of talking about changing buyer behavior, and actually I was just chatting to Matt briefly before we came on air about this as well. Is that so? We know over the last number of years we've talked a lot about changing buyer behavior and the empowered buyer, and now the buyer can do all of this research. Etc. But we probably in the last while crossed over even into the realm of where we have not just an empowered buyer, but maybe even a confused buyer, an overwhelmed buyer, because there is so much noise out there. There's so many products coming on stream. There's so much information that it's actually getting, harder and harder for them to analyze or even make decisions. So how is changing buyer behavior? Maybe Matt, you want to kick this off. How is changing buyer behavior changing the dynamics of how sales and marketing need to operate?
Well, I think historically we've seen sales and marketing playing different roles and splitting the sales funnel horizontally, right? Where marketing owns typically the top of the funnel, some sales owns the bottom of the funnel. And even when you've got alignment around objectives, like that isn't necessarily a bad way historically to look at breakup of responsibilities. I think the buying behavior changes today and the complexity of buying, especially in B2B, it's changed that split in the funnel from being horizontal to being vertical. Where you can now split the funnel in the middle, right? And it doesn't mean that you've got people on necessarily sales on both sides, sales and marketing on two different sides, but the point is that you have sales and marketing playing roles at every stage of the buying process, beginning, middle, and end. The bigger the deal, the more complex the buying process is, the more complex the internal buying committee is, the more likely sales can have an impact on building trust and rapport directly at the beginning of the sales process, at the beginning of the buying process. You don't have to wait for marketing to generate lead. You don't have to wait for someone to find your blog post on Google. So I think that there's an increasing understanding of that buying committee. I think CEB says there's on average 6.8 members of the internal buying committee. So do you know who those people are? Do you know what roles you're targeting? Do you know what relationships those 6.8 people have with and amongst each other? Both positive and negative relationships amongst each other, and how are you leveraging that to build consensus? I think that level of understanding and then that integrated communication across sales and marketing to the customer is extremely important. I think that companies that separate those behaviors, companies that separate those communication programs, run the very real risk of telling conflicting stories to the prospect that just confuses and intimidates prospects and may just push them into the arms of your competitors.
Yeah, absolutely. What about your thoughts on that, Tony?
The thing that and I've kind of, I think I kind of answered this in my, but one thing that's kind of popping into my head is, the millennial generation, and I just read some article where, more and more people they're looking for authenticity in marketing and sales approaches, and I think that is I think that authenticity, where people don't want to be sold anymore, and people can tell the difference between salesy content and authentic content, and buyers are looking for companies with a conscience, right? And I think, I don't think we can tap dance anymore for buyers. I think we spent many years being able to kind of tap dance and show and tell and brag and put it on a show for buyers and have them believe what they are seeing. But buyers are not falling for that stuff anymore, and they're looking for authenticity, and they don't want to be sold to. So I think we've got sales and marketing have got to start confronting this idea of authenticity in a major way, because I think that is becoming more and more relevant every day that goes by. I would be interested to hear on what other people think about this idea of authenticity and how that's changing.
I think that's a fascinating point, because obviously you have to be authentic. You can't create authenticity necessarily, because then it's not really authentic. But what about you? What are your thoughts, Samantha, on this idea of buyer behavior changing the dynamics, or on what Tony's point about people wanting more authenticity?
So, I find this interesting. I don't disagree with anything that Matt or Tony have described. I think there's very real differences in how people research and how people talk to their peers about how even our salespeople engaged. A lot more is done virtually than in person, right? We do a lot more of that kind of work. But there's some really fascinating things to me that have not changed. And I think sometimes we in sales and marketing forget to go back to these sort of tried into human behavior things. It's easy to automate. So we forget that people actually want a conversation, right? And we've become sometimes too dependent on tools and process. And there's this very important part of humanity. Authenticity is part of it. Part of it's around engagement and how to have conversations, how to listen, how to respond. And I'm, seeing a return, a renaissance to some of those important aspects. And I think it's really important that we continue to track what's changing, but don't lose sight of the people behind this who still have sort of fundamental wants, desires, motivators, and needs.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, and just building on what Tony mentioned. So, do you think, Samantha, that some of that that need for interaction, I mean, that establishes a lot of that authenticity, doesn't it? If you do take the time or do take the make the effort to reach out and connect in a meaningful way as opposed to an automated way.
Yeah, and there's a role for automation, but it doesn't replace those human interactions. And I think those things continue to be important. I think they, in some ways, help you stand out more because there's so much of the other sort of robotic things that are happening that when you let your buyers see sort of your true self and sort of get a spotlight into that's highly valued, and it does allow you to differentiate. And sometimes it's very simple things. For just to give you one example, I was working with a company that sold software to SharePoint administrators, and it was not very exciting. But one of the human things that we realized was that their buyer was easily convinced of the value proposition of their software, but their buyer had no game in the company. They couldn't go back into the organization and sell them. They didn't have their own budget, right? They didn't have all these things. And so what marketing did to help that was to build a champion kit, right? To help that person who loved this software be able to sell within their organization. We couldn't just go around them. And for a whole bunch of complex reasons. And we needed to help them be an asset. So sometimes it's just really understanding the people that love what we do, and helping arm them with the tools they need to make the business case internally, as one example.
Yeah.
Can I jump in there just for a second to kind of, I work very closely with a company that's kind of leading the way in sales artificial intelligence, and they're analyzing phone conversations, and this company has analyzed over 500,000 phone conversations, that B2B phone conversations. And a lot of what we know about sales and negotiation is from some old dude back in the 1920s who said this is the way and wrote a couple of books and how to win friends and influence people. And we've been kind of using these methodologies, but now we have machine learning telling us and giving us a lot of data. And and one of the things that AI is telling us about sales behavior and buyer behavior, one of the things is called the 2-minute cliff, which means that they're finding over 500,000 conversations. That's when salespeople brag about themselves for more than 2 minutes within a typical sales call. They brag about themselves and their organization for more than 2 minutes. Their chances of closing that sale drastically decrease. So every second that passes after that 2-minute mark, they start losing their chance of closing that sale. Also, what AI is telling us is that top sales performers, they have a talk to listen ratio of 43% of the time they listen on the telephone to 57% of the time 43% of the time they're talking on a sales call and 7% of the time they're listening, when bottom sales performers are talking upwards of 75% of the time. And AI is also telling us that if you don't allow your buyer to speak more than 4 minutes in 4-minute spurts. So if you can get your buyer within a typical sales call speaking for more than 4 minutes at a time, your chances of closing that sale drastically increase. So I think all this information is telling us not only authenticity, but I think buyers want to be heard, and they want they need people listening to them. And I don't think, again, they don't want salespeople tap dancing and selling them. They want to be heard, and they want that seller to really understand their problems so that they can, of course, be a solution to that problem. So, I think that's definitely the direction we're going into. Salespeople need to learn to shut up and listen and be able to take that knowledge that information that they're gathering from the buyer and relay and transfer that information to marketing, so marketing can create content around that effective listening that salespeople are now utilizing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, that was great point, Tony. Thank you. We've kind of touched on technology, right? And technology is an integral part of both sales and marketing these days, and will continue to be so. And there's a lot of positives, and there's some negatives attached to that. But I do think it has certainly blurred the lines and impacted both roles significantly. So, Matt, from your point of view, how do you think technology has impacted both sales and marketing together?
Well, I think technology is not a strategy. Technology is an enabler of a strategy. I think that the more technology we have, the more opportunity companies sometimes take to let the tail wag the dog, and think less about the customer conversation, more about trying to automate something, trying to let machines decide something. I think the blurring of lines is a fantastic thing. I think in many cases, blurring of lines creates it forces change. It creates a little bit of chaos. But I think sometimes you got to break some glass to figure out a new way of doing business. I think, this is why culture is so important to me. When we have a buying journey internally with complex B2B organizations that is not as simple as send email, download white paper, get into pipeline, right? I mean, it's just not that linear and that clean. You're of course, you're going to have some blurring of lines. And of course, companies are going to struggle figuring out how to do that. What I want to see inside companies as we not only see a greater role of technology, but with this greater blurring of lines, I want organizations across sales and marketing to have a common sense of purpose, right, around revenue and sales sort of results, but also empathy. I want to see empathy across those blurred lines. I want marketing to understand how hard sales is, and I want sales to understand that marketing doesn't have some magic pixie dust that's going to generate the right leads that we've been holding out on. But I think also to realize that we don't have the answers, that we are literally in real time on the battlefield inventing new ways of going to market, new ways of sales and marketing working together. We're not going to get that right away, and it's going to be different for every organization. I mean, you can read all the blog posts and all the guru books you want, but your business, your culture, your environment, your customer base is unique. And so the way you are going to interpret everything you learn and see from a strategy standpoint, from a challenger standpoint, from a technology standpoint, is going to be different. You have to figure that out yourself. But I think it's valuable when you can say, okay, let's for a second ignore the line between sales and marketing. How do we as a company go to market in a way that not only is going to be very customer centric and delight our customers and most efficiently achieve our goals, but something that's going to create some predictability and scalability of our results moving forward. That is a difficult thing to accomplish, but that's the prime objective right now.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment, Matt, because I think getting back to your first comment about technology is that some people take technology and implement it, as you say, as a strategy, right? Rather than looking at, okay, how does sales and marketing, approach this whole problem together, and then how do we leverage technology to actually, help with that and automate that. So it's kind of, and I think I think some of the marketing automation companies have oversold their technology, and people have sort of are believing that they can sit back and wait for all these lovely leads to come flooding in. But I do think that's an incredibly important point, is that they have to sit down and put the strategy in place first and leverage the technology to enable that. Excellent. Samantha, what are your thoughts on technology and the impact?
I think similar to Matt, we sometimes get lost in technology and we sort of chase shiny new objects and things. I think in most organizations, we don't need new technology or more technology. We need to use it more effectively. And one of the things that I did a bunch of research to sort of look at this issue around sales and marketing alignment, and what were some of the things that those people who were successful at aligning did differently than the people who were not meeting their revenue goals together and didn't feel like they were on the same page. And one of the things that they did differently was they documented service level agreements. And this is the most unsexy, boring piece of advice I'll ever give anybody ever, right? Like, blah, like yuck, who wants to be thinking about it? But the fact is, when you set expectations in writing, it on both sales and marketing side, it really makes a big difference. And technology allows us to hold ourselves accountable to those SLAs, right? It allows us to create triggers of activity based on something that's happened and to alert when things are not working well. And we often don't use the systems we have in place to help us do this. We often use it for routing leads or running a monthly report, but we can actually operationalize the behavior changes that we want. And technology is a really wonderful way to do that, but it takes that stepping back and thinking about it in a strategic way, and thinking about the change we want to make, and then making sure that we have the systems in place to help support that change. It can't tell us what change to make, but it can help us make the change.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you brought up the A word, the accountability word. It's nice that I think you're absolutely right, is that you have to put something in place that can be, that can be measured and that can provide that level of accountability for both sides. And how about you, Tony? How about how's technology blurring roles and lines?
I think we're being inundated. I think we're going to hit a peak. The technology bubble is going to kind of burst at a certain point, and we're going to start realizing and kind of going back to some fundamental things. And I'll get back to that point in just a second. But I think we got to look at this idea of persuasion. I mean, how do you sell somebody? You need to persuade them, and persuasion the persuasion technology has been the same for 3,000 years, since Aristotle created his 3 pillars of persuasion. People, if you want to persuade somebody to do something, you need to get that person feeling something, and people want to feel. And we're in a day and age right now with so much technology that it's very hard for us to feel things, right? Everything is electronic communication, and we're not connecting very much anymore. And if you can't get somebody feeling something, you won't be able to persuade them to do anything. So I think we're hitting this spot right now where, we're going to hit a spot soon where there's just too much going on, and how can we start really reaching people and making them feel something? So I think we're going to see, I don't think we've even scratched the surface of what video is going to be able to bring to the sales and marketing process, and personalized video. How salespeople will start, instead of sending an email to somebody, they'll start sending a personalized video, 20-second, 30-second personalized video to that party. How companies will start kind of using Facebook pixels or retargeting strategies and start really retargeting people by their first name and getting more and more personal to really create that pathos, what Aristotle called it, the pathos, to get people feeling something. So I think we're going to kind of go back to that. We're going to find a way to use technology, video, in my opinion, to really start reaching people on a whole new way that is thousands of years old, right? We know how to persuade somebody, but I think we're just getting lost right now with all these bright and shiny toys around us. And I think we'll start narrowing back in towards what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's a great point, and I think, in fact, if you look at the proliferation of technology, if we could even get sales and marketing collaborating within their CRM system, and actually, there was at least one technology where they're all coming together, I think that would be a good step forward. Could be a good collaborative platform. So you touched on this earlier, Tony. I'd like to get the other people's input on this as well. So the future of sales and marketing, are they always and necessarily going to be separate but interdependent disciplines, or does anybody envision a future where sales and marketing are kind of like completely like integrated or the same, or whatever. Maybe Samantha, do you want to start off with that one?
Sure. And I'll start by telling you that I disagree with a lot of people on this. A lot of people believe that, and I think, Tony, even you touched on this, that the solution to alignment is to have sales and marketing report up to the same infrastructure and sort of belong to a revenue group. And I've heard a lot of good logical arguments for it. And there's a part of me that believes that to be true. However, the practical reality for me, I don't see that any time in our future, because sales and marketing are different disciplines and we do different things. So I believe that we need a shared missions, and I believe we need to align far better than we traditionally do. But I don't think the answer is to make it a single team. Because I think in my experience, typically when I've seen that tried to be done in practice, people are better at selling or they're better at marketing, and the other ones tends to suffer. So I think for practical reasons, I don't see a future where we all have to belong to a single organization. Now, having said all that, the culture of the company, the nature of your buyer relationships, the price point of your products, all of those things are going to play a role if they are part of the same organizational structure or not. But at the end of the day, we need to have shared goals and shared vision for where the company is going. And then we need to let the people do their jobs independently and in a coordinated way, but let us focus on what we're good at. We need product marketing to be good at what it does. We need demand gen good at what it does. We need inside sales people good at what they do. So I think it'll evolve, but I'm not sold on it being a single organization at this point.
Excellent. How about you, Matt? Some people talked about the smarketing department, because I think it's hard to abbreviate or put the two of them together. But anyway, what are your thoughts on the future of sales and marketing as independent and separate or interdependent disciplines?
This is not an organization issue. This isn't about the org chart. I think this comes down to culture and accountability. It doesn't matter who reports to who. If you've got an organization that understands that the job is to make money, that the job is to drive sales and revenue, right? And you're going to drive sales and revenue if you find mutually beneficial solutions between yourself and your customers. So I think there's value in having a healthy tension sometimes between sort of the immediate need for sales and the long-term need to build trust and credibility and value, and really work towards building next month's sales, next quarter sales, next year's sales, because there's plenty of prospects that are just, no matter what you say, no matter what you do, are not ready to buy right now. And you could do collateral damage if you try to push them into those deals too quickly. And you're not going to solve for that. You're not going to create alignment simply by having everyone report to the same organization. Because we've tried this already. Like, we've got marketing organizations that report up through, a revenue department. We've got inside sales teams that report through marketing. And they work not because of the org chart. They work because there's alignment in the organization around a strategy. Everyone's got their roles, right? Everyone's gonna, not everyone's gonna do everything. You still have to segment out the roles. So I think that the organization doesn't matter. We, every time we go in an organization and try to help, companies sort of transform the way they go to market and create that better synergies and better results, it comes down to culture and accountability. That's where I would recommend people put their focus.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Matt, because I do think there's often too much of I think there's too much time and energy and focus spent on drawing up org charts and like writing whiteboards, and he's reporting to this and all of that. And as you say, it's really a cultural thing as opposed to a functional thing. But people get very comfortable when they're dealing functionally as opposed to culturally.
Well, I think people feel like it's something you could do, right? I think solving the cultural challenge is less transparent and is less understandable. Getting everyone in the organization to really embrace accountability, you can't do that in a half-hour meeting. I mean, that takes time. So writing an org chart feels addressable. It feels like something I could do right now. Oh, this is a positive step, maybe, but it is not going to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And Tony, you mentioned this earlier. What are your thoughts on the future of sales and marketing?
I think through evolution, we're just going to start creating these hybrid positions where, salespeople will become marketing people. They're gonna have to have knowledge and education in both areas, and marketing people are going to need to not only know how to create and market, but they're also going to need to know how to close a sale as well. I think organizations are going to start looking for more and more of those hybrid type of people. And I think we're just going to see a natural fusion between these two departments, because they're just going to rely, both departments are going to need to rely on each other more and more and more as, as we start kind of moving forward. So I think it's just evolution is just going to create these hybrid positions.
Yeah, and I mean I do agree. I think there's things today that salespeople need to have a certain amount of micro marketing skills, and marketing people need to understand the dynamics of a sales process that much more, because we talk about blurring of lines, and I think there's a lot that each can certainly teach each other and help each other with. So as we bump up against the end of what's been a fascinating panel discussion, is there one simple thing that the listeners could implement in their organization to start this alignment process, maybe? So maybe if I ask each of you to come up with one simple thing that the listeners could take away and start doing today. Samantha, what would that be from your point of view?
I would have marketing start measuring and being held responsible for the amount of time that buyers are spending in each stage of the buying process. So whatever that buying process is for your product and service, start measuring how long people are staying in those stages and hold marketing accountable to shrinking that time. It will never get to zero. We can't take steps out of the buying process out, but we can help support moving people more with less friction through those stages.
Yeah, I like that. So good velocity measurements. That's a good one. And Matt, how about you? What's one simple thing you think listeners could do?
With marketing organizations, that, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this conversation, I mean, I think it's on us. It's on marketing to really sort of take the first step forward. Many marketing organizations are focused on marketing qualified leads, MQLs, as their primary metric. If you simply changed your focus from MQLs to SQLs, from marketing qualified leads, meaning right person of the right company that's filled out a form somewhere, to sales qualified leads, meaning they have some version of budget authority need timeline. There's some version of qualification, a heightened level of qualification that becomes your primary measured output. I'm not asking you to be responsible for pipeline. I'm not asking you to be responsible for sales yet. I'm not asking you to fully integrate what you're doing with the sales organization. But if you simply pivot from MQL to SQL, that starts to drive a level of behavior and thinking inside the organization that gets the ball rolling, that makes it a little easier to start to accept the cultural and accountability changes that are to come.
Yeah, no, I like that, Matt, a lot, because I've always thought the MQL to some degree is a bit of a cop out, but so I like that idea of pivoting to SQLs. And Tony, what's one piece of advice you would give to listeners that they could do something in their organization today to align better between sales and marketing?
I think starting to find a way to incentivize salespeople to help in the creation of content, marketing content would be a great thing, where maybe you have a Trello board set up and salespeople can start inputting ideas for content, for blogs, for webinars, or promotions, and incentivizing. And if that idea then comes to fruition and gets put into effect, that maybe they get some sort of commission based on that idea, or have your marketing people start putting their salespeople's names as the writer of blogs. And whatever leads come in through those blogs, that salesperson maybe gets some sort of commission off of. So, really start maybe finding ways, and the only way I can think of right now is, incentivizing them financially to get salespeople part of the content creation, because really they know best what type of content buyers are looking for. They might not know they know it, but through a simple interview process, amazing information can come out that can create amazing content for marketing.
Okay, great, thank you. And if any of you have one final insight you want to share, if not, that's fine. But anybody have one last insight they want to share?
This is Samantha. I have one little thing that sounds so simple, but it's been really interesting. In the research that I did, one of the things that I assumed I was going to prove was that the frequency of communication between sales and marketing was directly proportional to sales and marketing being aligned. That basically, that old adage, say it once, say it twice, say it 18 times, right? They're still not going to remember, just keep saying it. But I actually found something different, which is the variety of formats you're using to communicate had more of a role than the pure volume. So if you're going to launch a new content asset, don't just send out email 15 times. Send an email out once. Use it on your intranet. Set up a training session. Do whatever mechanisms you can, and that variety of that communication format played a more important role than simply increasing the amount of times that I shared that content.
Excellent. Okay.
I would say if you're in marketing and you have not carried a bag, if you have not had a sales job, you can't go back and change time. But I would encourage you to literally sit and watch and observe your sales team selling. Sit amongst them and watch what it takes to follow up with leads, watch how many voicemails they get, watch how many bad phone numbers they have. It is enlightening to every single marketing person I've ever worked with that has not done this and has not either done sales or observed it, to see just how hard sales is. And it's not an excuse, and it's not an excuse for what sales is or isn't generating. But I think it's a step to help develop a little more of that empathy that I think helps drive the cultural changes required.
Yeah, it's a fantastic point. Okay, what I wanted to do now is maybe you're going to start off, Tony. Just give a quick outline to our listeners how they can contact you, find out more about you.
The best way is my website, www.tonyperzo.com, or you can also go to www.yousuckatnegotiating.com. It'll take you to the site as well, or just find me on LinkedIn under Tony Perzo, or just search You Suck at Negotiating and you'll find me.
That's great. And Samantha?
I love that URL. That's great. You can find me on Twitter and LinkedIn and all the places you would expect. An easy thing to do is to look up unleashpossible.com. I did publish a book that talks a lot about sales and marketing alignment and how I've gone about it. Lots of tips and tricks and case studies and examples in there. So that's a great resource. And also, of course, reach out to me from unleashpossible.com with specific questions. I'm always happy to answer them.
Great. And Matt?
I'm still reeling from You Suck at Negotiating. That is the best URL ever. Fantastic. For us, we're not nearly that creative. We just Heinz Marketing, HEINZ marketing.com is where you can find us online. We got lots of best practices and tips and advice on building that predictable pipeline. I'm on Twitter at Heinz Marketing, and I'm just Matt, MATT, at HeinzMarketing.com.
Great. And you can find me at isuckateverything.com. So, this is John Golden from Pipeliner CRM and SalesPOP Online Sales Magazine. Listen, thanks, Matt, Samantha, Tony. This is a fantastic discussion. This recording will be available for people to review again, and also for those who registered but couldn't attend. So again, thanks everybody for coming today. Thanks to our panelists. This is John Golden, and we'll see you all again soon. Bye now.